On today's episode, I'm going to show you how to make this water lily votive. Just a little bit of polymer clay and embossing powder, and you have a great decoration for your summer soiree. So the supplies that you'll need for the water lily votive, well, you'll start with 1 block of translucent polymer clay and some liquid polymer clay. I like the Fimo Effect and the Fimo Liquid. You will also need several of the Judikins products, the embossing powder in the pink twinkle, the mica gloss in green, and it helps to have the stamp cleaner as well, and the 4 leaves stamp. You will also need a small votive and a little candle for when you're done. And you will also need 2 of the Fimo cutter sets, one that has 3 different sizes of hexagon, and the other one is a large teardrop. To start making the petals for the water lily, I roll out the translucent clay, it's the entire block, on the 3rd thickest setting on my pasta machine. Now it may vary depending on your pasta machine, so you may need to add or subtract clay for this. I've also poured out a little bit of the Fimo Liquid onto my work surface, and I'm going to spread it on the surface of the clay in a very thin coat. Just keep spreading. I don't want it goopy, I just want it a little bit sticky, and this is we're going to use to adhere the embossing powder. Now the reason we use translucent clay for the votive is so that when the light is in the votive, either a candle or a battery operated one, you will see it through the petals, through the translucent clay. So I've just about got liquid clay all over the surface of this. And then I'm going to be using the wonderful Judikins embossing powders. I've really had a lot of fun with these. Today we're using the pink twinkle. It's a mixture of embossing powder and it also has a nice iridescent glitter in it. And I'm just going to start to sprinkle it over the surface of the clay. And I'm going to start with kind of a medium amount, and I will add more later. This does get a little bit messy, so you will want to have your paper towel handy to wipe the excess off of your fingers. Just going to start spreading the embossing powder. It gets a little lumpy. It doesn't have to be even. What's nice about it is it gives it kind of a natural effect that it's not an even coating. But this isn't quite enough powder, so I'm going to add some more in the places where the clay is still sticky. But I try not to add too much so I have embossing powder everywhere. I just try and put what I need to cover the surface of the clay. And like I said, don't worry if it's not even. It's still going to look great in the end. Okay, let's see if we got it right this time. This looks pretty good. I want the surface of the clay to start to feel fairly dry and not sticky, because we're going to be stamping over this clay afterwards and we don't want a sticky surface. But first, before we stamp on the clay, we're going to actually cut out the shapes that we need to make the votive. And if there's extra powder on the surface, I just kind of brush it to the edge. Then I'm going to wipe the excess off my finger. And what I've chosen to cut out petals on my water lily is this large elongated teardrop cutter. And I'm going to do 3 layers of 6 petals, so I will need 18 of them. So I'm just going to start cutting. This is where you need a good solid work surface that you can use cutters on. So those are my 18 petals. Then I'm going to take my clay blade and take away the excess clay. And you don't want to get rid of this we're going to need this for the project, but you don't want to throw it away because we're just going to use it for the hexagonal pieces that I mentioned. So this pretty much gives you an idea of how you get your petals out, and next we're going to stamp it. Before we stamp all the petals with the pattern on them, I'm going to take the scraps from the sheet that I cut the petals out of, and in this sheet I have mixed all the embossing powder into the translucent clay and rolled it again on the third thickest setting on the pasta machine. Now what we need this for is the base of the votive, and I'm going to use the hexagonal cutters for this. So I'm going to cut one large and then two medium hexagons. Just really easy, and a couple of the small ones as well. And these we'll use in different stages as we're working on the votive. And then I'm going to take this and I'll set these smaller pieces aside. Whoops. Probably should have pressed a little bit harder on that. And set the clay aside. And we're going to start with this one, but we're not quite there yet. I'll show you that in a minute. First, we're going to use this Judican stamp, the 4 leaves, and I chose the one on the end because it imitates the patterns on a water lily petal with the vertical lines. And I need a little bit of the mica gloss green ink, and I actually apply it with a finger. So once again, you're going to want a paper towel handy. And I'm just going to dab a little bit on my finger because I just want a light coat. See, that's even a little too much. I'm going to cover the stamp and then center the tip over my petal and roll over it. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just trying to give the petals a little bit of character. Those are 6 petals for the first layer of the water lily. And I have my votive, it's just a small glass votive. I'm going to turn it upside down. This is glass. You don't want to use plastic because you're going to actually bake your pieces on the votive, and if it's not glass, it's going to melt in the oven, and that would be bad. So this I'm going to stick in the very center. This is the largest of the hexagons. Now you wonder, why am I using a hexagon? Well, this is kind of a little water lily cheat sheet here. Just going to press it on, get my air pockets out of the clay. And then I'm going to shape the petals, just pinch in the middle and apply just the very tip onto one of the points of the hexagon. And it gives you a nice indication so you can evenly space your petals on the votive. So this is a great way to create your first layer. And this layer I actually stick down to the glass. If you want to afterwards, you can pull up the tips of the petals a little and roll them upwards so they have a little bit more movement to them, but it's okay if the first layer is stuck to the glass. But you can see how this makes it easy for spacing the petals. And one more to go. All right, and that is the first layer of petals. I see this one cracked a little bit. We'll just reshape it. And at this point, you'll set it on your baking tray and bake it for 30 minutes for the recommended temperature for the brand of clay that you're using, and then take it out and allow it to cool completely. So now I have my votive here. It's baked, it's cooled, and I'm going to add the next 2 layers of petals. So first, because this is baked clay and I want my raw clay to stick, I'm going to add just a very light coat of liquid clay to it. And then I'm going to take one of my medium-sized hexagons and offset the points from the first one. So while my votive was baking, I shaped the rest of the petals, and I'm going to do exactly what I did last time, but I'm just not going to press them down hard and all the way to the glass. I'm going to leave them sticking out a little bit. And stick that down on there. Then I want to build this up because there's sort of an indentation in the middle, and I'd like to flatten out the base of the votive a little bit more to put the second row, actually it technically is the third row. And so I'm going to just put in 2 little hexagons. Direction is really not that important because they're just going to get covered up. Row 3, I'm going to put in between the row that you just put on. And when the clay bakes, it will slump a little bit, but if you leave it sticking out, it will still remain sticking out a bit. And it won't cling all the way to the glass. So it gives your water lily its shape. Okay, so we've got all those petals on there. Whoops, that one. Okay, shape that up. And sometimes I even bend the tips out a little bit on the 2 layers that I just put on. Gives it even a little bit more shape. And then to finish off the back of this, I'm going to take the last medium hexagon and place it over the top. You can see some of the petals kind of come out. Then what I'll do sometimes is just flatten a little on the surface, but you want to, well, now it's stuck, but I'll flip it back over, and you want to make sure to bake it with the glass votive turned upside down so that your petals will shape around the glass nicely. And once you're done with all of that, you have a lovely water lily votive, and you can just put your little votive candle in the center, and it's ready for your summer soiree.
For this and other projects, visit our website. And remember, when creativity knocks, open the door.